At the far edge of the last ice age, the world was a place of extremes. Winds howled across frozen plains, rivers were thick with ice, and the earth itself seemed to tremble beneath the feet of creatures that dwarfed any human imagination. Mammoths, their shaggy forms towering above the landscape, moved in herds that stretched across horizons, their tusks curling like massive crescents, scraping the snow and ice as they fed. Saber-tooth cats, muscles coiled and fangs glinting in the pale sun, prowled silently through forests, hunting with patience honed by millions of years of evolution. Giant ground sloths, slow but immense, left deep impressions in the mud as they moved, their massive claws capable of felling trees and tearing apart anything that threatened them. And into this world, fragile humans stepped, armed with nothing more than stone tools, sharpened spears, and an ingenuity that would eventually allow them to survive where few others could. From the moment our ancestors set foot on these frozen continents, they were faced with the impossible challenge of living alongside creatures that could crush, gore, or devour them in an instant. Yet archaeology and fossil records show that humans did not merely survive, they learned, adapted, and in time became formidable competitors at the top of the food chain. Across Eurasia, North America, and South America, evidence emerges of coordinated hunts that demonstrate an astonishing understanding of animal behavior. At Dolny Vestanice, for example, mammoth bones have been found arranged in patterns suggesting shelters and communal spaces, a hint that humans were not only hunting these giants, but also learning to live alongside them, to use every part of their massive bodies for survival. Meat for sustenance, bones for tools, hides for warmth, and even tusks for artistic expression. In these kill sites, one can imagine the drama. Humans working together in disciplined groups, driving mammoths toward natural traps, cliffs, marshes, or narrow valleys, where their immense size became a liability. Spears and early projectile weapons were launched with deadly precision, coordinated to strike vital organs while avoiding the lethal sweep of a mammoth's tusks. The tactics required foresight, communication, and a depth of understanding that is hard to imagine without standing on those ancient plains. Predators like saber-tooth cats presented a different kind of challenge. Smilodon was not a pursuit predator, but a patient ambusher, built to kill with sudden bursts of explosive force, capable of subduing prey many times its size. Humans learned to read subtle signs, the sudden silence of birds in the trees, faint tracks in the snow, or the distant rustle of prey reacting to unseen danger. These skills allowed humans not only to survive, but to exploit opportunities, to scavenge from predator kills, defend themselves with fire and weapons, and over time even outmaneuver these formidable hunters. Then there were the giant ground sloths, whose slow, ponderous movements belied the danger they posed. Their claws could rend tree trunks or dismember a human in a single swipe. Yet humans approach these creatures with care and strategy. Cut marks on fossilized sloth bones reveal evidence of coordinated attacks. Humans encircling the creature, spears poised, striking at moments when the sloth exposed vulnerable areas. Every encounter was a high-stakes negotiation between intelligence and raw power, patience and survival instinct. The combination of these interactions, the hunts, the predator avoidance, and the strategic adaptation shaped human evolution profoundly. Brains became more specialized for planning, coordination, and learning. Social bonds strengthened as survival depended on cooperation. The ability to manipulate the environment through fire, traps, or landscape modification became a defining characteristic of human success. Yet as humans thrived, a shadow fell over the giants. Across continents, a pattern emerges. Shortly after human arrival, large animals began to disappear. In North America, mammoths, mastodons, and giant sloths declined sharply around 13,000 years ago. In Australia, giant marsupials vanished roughly 40,000 years ago. In Europe and Siberia, mammoth populations dwindled, leaving only isolated pockets behind. Scientists have long debated the causes of these extinctions, and evidence points to a complex interplay of factors. Climate was changing rapidly at the end of the Pleistocene. Ice sheets melted, vegetation patterns shifted, and habitats fragmented. Mammoths, adapted to cold, dry steppes, found their feeding grounds shrinking. Saber-tooth cats faced dwindling prey. Giant sloths struggled to find sufficient vegetation in altered landscapes. On the other hand, humans were expanding quickly across the globe, hunting skillfully and shaping the environments they entered with fire and other technologies. The overkill hypothesis suggests that even modest hunting pressure could push slow reproducing species toward extinction, especially when combined with the stresses of climate change. Genetic evidence from places like Wrangel Island offers further insight. Here, a small population of mammoths survived thousands of years longer than their continental relatives. But over time, their genetic diversity eroded, mutations accumulated, and reproductive rates declined. These animals, isolated and vulnerable, were ultimately doomed, not by human hands alone, but by the cumulative pressures of survival in a rapidly changing world. The story of humans and megafauna, therefore, is not simply one of predator and prey. It is a narrative of interdependence, adaptation, and ecological consequence. Humans relied on these giants for sustenance, materials, and cultural meaning, while their presence shaped human intelligence and social structures. Cave art from Raffignac, Chauvet, and other sites captures these relationships with remarkable precision. Mammoths rendered in sweeping motion, saber-tooths frozen in ambush, humans depicted in careful pursuit. These images reflect not just observation, but deep engagement, a testament to the role of these creatures in human imagination and survival. As humans became more efficient hunters and the giants more vulnerable, ecosystems shifted. Grasslands expanded into areas once dominated by herbivores. Predators that relied on large prey dwindled. The very landscape began to transform under the dual pressures of climate change and human influence. And yet the extinction of these animals did not spell the end for humans. On the contrary, the challenges they presented honed skills that would define our species: strategic thinking, cooperative problem-solving, technological innovation, and the ability to manipulate the environment on a large scale. By the time the last mammoths disappeared from continental landscapes, humans had already begun shaping a new world, one in which survival depended less on being small and clever, and more on intelligence, foresight, and adaptability. This first chapter of our story ends not with the death of giants alone, but with the rise of humans as the dominant force in ecosystems worldwide. Their disappearance set the stage for the expansion of human culture, the experimentation with agriculture, and the eventual construction of societies capable of reshaping entire continents. The world that had once groaned beneath mammoth herds, quivered at the steps of sloths, and held its breath under the stalking saber-tooth, now belonged to humanity, not as conquerors by might, but as survivors who had learned, adapted, and persisted in a world of extraordinary danger. As the giants disappeared from the continents, the world they once dominated transformed in ways that were both subtle and profound, rippling across ecosystems, human societies, and the evolutionary path of our species. The vast herds of mammoths that had once trampled grasslands into sweeping plains were gone, leaving spaces for forests to expand, for rivers to shift, and for predator-prey dynamics to reorganize. Saber-tooth cats, deprived of their primary prey, declined and vanished, while giant sloths, once architects of their forested domains, faded into memory. Humans, once dependent on these massive animals, were forced to innovate. The loss of megafauna demanded a diversification of diet and strategy, hunting smaller, more elusive animals, harvesting fish and shellfish along coasts and rivers, and gathering plants with increasing sophistication. Tools evolved to match these new needs: projectile weapons for long-range hunting, traps for small mammals, hooks and nets for aquatic resources, and ever more intricate systems of fire management to shape landscapes in ways that improved the odds of survival. Yet beyond survival, these changes also shaped culture and cognition. Art, storytelling, and ritual reflected the shifting human relationship with the natural world. The cave paintings that once depicted mammoths and giant predators gave way to images of smaller game, plants, and abstract symbols, reflecting both the loss of large animals and the growing capacity of humans to imagine, plan, and record their world. In parallel, the extinction of these giants had cascading effects on the planet's ecosystems. Plant communities that had evolved alongside massive herbivores now grew unchecked. Grasslands expanded or contracted unpredictably. Forests reclaimed land previously kept open by grazing. Predators adapted, migrated, or disappeared. The loss of keystone species, the creatures that shaped entire habitats, triggered a profound ecological reorganization, one in which humans, increasingly dominant and inventive, began to fill ecological niches in ways no other species could. It is here, in the wake of these losses, that the true significance of human ingenuity becomes clear. Survival was no longer a matter of following prey or evading predators. It required anticipation, long-term planning, and the ability to manipulate environments across seasons and years. Humans learned to store food, to coordinate hunts over long distances, to understand the behavior of multiple species simultaneously, and to create social systems capable of sustaining these complex endeavors. The extinction of megafauna, tragic as it was for the animals themselves, catalyzed an unparalleled acceleration in human development. And yet, the story is not merely one of triumph or conquest. It is a story of interconnection, of unintended consequences, and of a fragile balance between power and responsibility. The same intelligence that allowed humans to survive the mammoth steppes and forested valleys of the Ice Age also enabled them to reshape the world in ways that were irreversible. Evidence from archaeological sites reveals how humans adapted their movements and technologies to changing prey availability, from the careful tracking of reindeer across tundra to the seasonal exploitation of bison in North America. Cultural innovation accelerated, and with it, the capacity to thrive in environments previously unhospitable. This period also illuminates the subtle psychological and social effects of living alongside and then losing these giants. Anthropologists suggest that humans carried the memory of these creatures in myth, ritual, and social learning, embedding an awareness of ecological stakes into the foundation of human culture. The megafauna's disappearance was not silent. It resonated in the human imagination, shaping stories, cautionary tales, and symbolic frameworks that would endure for millennia. And yet, the pace of change was extraordinary. Within a few thousand years, landscapes once dominated by massive herbivores were irreversibly altered. Predator populations collapsed, and humans, increasingly clever, versatile, and technologically adept, assumed dominance as the apex species. In hindsight, the narrative of human evolution and the decline of the giants is deeply intertwined. The challenges presented by mammoths, saber-tooths, and sloths forced humans to innovate, cooperate, and expand cognition in ways that no other species experienced. At the same time, humans became an ecological force capable of triggering cascading extinctions, whether intentionally or inadvertently. This duality, the simultaneous shaping and destruction of ecosystems, defines the story of the Pleistocene's final chapters. And while the last mammoth, the last saber-tooth, and the last sloth disappeared, their legacy persisted. Genetic studies of surviving populations, fossilized dung, and archaeological remains allow us to reconstruct the ecosystems of the past with remarkable precision, providing insight into the adaptive strategies of both humans and animals. Climate proxies from ice cores and sediment reveal the rapidity of environmental change, while careful analysis of stone tools and hunting sites illustrate human ingenuity and cultural evolution. Together, these pieces form a portrait of a world in transition, a planet reshaped by both climate and human agency, and a species stepping into a role it had never before occupied. In the final reckoning, the extinction of megafauna was neither simple nor uniform. Some species vanished abruptly, Others lingered for millennia in isolated refuges. Some populations succumbed primarily to environmental pressures, others to human predation or a combination of factors. What remains clear is that humans emerged from this period not merely as survivors, but as architects of ecosystems, wielding knowledge, foresight, and social cooperation to survive where giants once ruled. Their rise redefined ecological dynamics, established patterns of resource exploitation, and set humanity on a trajectory that would eventually lead to agriculture, settlement, and civilization itself. And as we reflect on this epoch, we are reminded that the story of humanity cannot be told apart from the story of the giants that came before us. Mammoths, saber-tooths, and ground sloths were not merely obstacles or prey, they were catalysts that shaped human cognition, social structure, and culture. Their presence demanded innovation. Their absence forced adaptation. In every fossilized tusk, in every spear-marked bone, and in every cave painting, we glimpse the entwined destinies of humans and megafauna, a narrative of challenge, ingenuity, loss, and emergence. The Ice Age giants are gone, but their influence endures, etched into the landscapes they once roamed, into the technologies and strategies humans developed to survive, and into the very story of our species. They remind us that the rise of humanity was never inevitable, but forged in a crucible of danger, intelligence, and persistence, in a world where survival demanded both courage and creativity. And as we stand today, peering into the bones and frozen remains of these lost creatures, we are invited to imagine not only the majesty of the past, but the extraordinary journey of humans to the top of the ecological hierarchy. A journey made possible, paradoxically, by the giants we both feared and relied upon, by the creatures whose fall heralded the rise of our own species, shaping the very destiny of life on Earth.